I want to speak today about proportionality. It's going to be one of those sermons. Proportionality actually is a very, very underrated and important part of the way people relate to each other and the way we make judgments about the world. There's a Jewish American psychologist who's a professor emeritus of psychology at the University of Washington, named Dr. John Mordechai Gottman. Fascinating researcher whose work focuses on divorce prediction and marital stability. He spent his entire career studying healthy marriages and has scientifically identified the behaviors that contribute to dysfunctional ones. Apparently, this man can spend just a short time with a couple and predict with over 90% accuracy if they will still be married 5 years later. What do you think is the single biggest determinant to a happy and healthy marriage? He found that the single biggest determinant was proportionality, specifically the ratio of positive to negative comments the partners make to one another. The optimal ratio, he found, was 5 positive comments for every negative comment. For those who ended up divorced, the average ratio was 0.77 to 1, meaning something like 3 positive comments for every 4 negative comments. So the lesson here is that if you want your relationship not only to survive but to thrive, proportionality is what matters. You have to make a concerted effort to express compliments in a 5-to-1 ratio over criticisms. I could see many people's elbows moving in the crowd. Not only do studies show that proportionality is what's most important in marriages, but in many, many different areas of life as well. Work relationships, scientific information, even the creative arts. A good artist will tell you it's all about proportions. You've got to get it right, or the likelihood of failure increases dramatically. This is a lesson that's actually embedded in both our Parsha and the story of Hanukkah, where the proportions seem out of whack. Let's turn to our Parsha first. To a midrash specifically, that's a rabbinic interpretation on the Parsha that's quoted by Rashi. In the Parsha we read, Joseph is extricated from the pit by his brothers to be sold to a caravan of merchants for the purpose of being resold in the slave markets of Egypt. You know the story. As the Torah tells the tale, it turns its attention for a moment to that caravan and gives us information that's seemingly useless, telling us that these merchants were carrying spices and perfumes on their regular route from Mesopotamia to Egypt. Well, there's nothing irrelevant in the Torah, so why do we care what the merchants were transporting? The Midrash says this information is actually crucial to the story, because normally merchants from Mesopotamia to Egypt were carrying fuel. They were carrying kerosene. And if Joseph was carried in the caravan along with kerosene, exposed for a prolonged period to the fumes, he could very well have suffered permanent physical damage. Not only did this caravan not have kerosene, it had the most pleasant of aromas, spices and perfumes, which helped ease the journey for Joseph. And this, says the Midrash, was a small miracle, a disproportionately small miracle. Nothing supernatural happened, nothing that broke the laws of physics, but this unusual sign was effective because Joseph understood that this was out of place, unusual. It must mean that God is with me, that he was not alone. The miracle of Hanukkah sends a similar message. The miracle of oil, so central to this holiday, it transpired in a chamber in the temple called the Kodesh, which is a room right before the Kodesh HaKodashim, the Holy of Holies. This room was off limits to Levites and Israelites, regular Jews. Hence, the only people who witnessed the miracle of the oil were very few Kohanim, very few priests. If Hashem wanted to make a miracle, why not do something on a grander scale? Why even bother commemorating a miracle so disproportionately small and simple, especially when we do nothing to commemorate the falling of the walls of Jericho or the sun and the moon standing still, other greater miracles seemingly in the Hebrew Bible. But like with the story of Joseph, the reason is because that miracle of oil may have been small, but it was effective. It served as a sign from heaven that God was pleased with the rededication of the temple, with the new priestly leadership, with the defeat of the Greeks and the Hellenizers, and it was a miracle that brought unity and reassurance to the people. Remember the butterfly effect. A little butterfly that flaps his wings. Small actions can often result in great, great change. From the start of Israel's targeted operations in Gaza, the term proportionality has been used, as it has in almost every other IDF operation, to limit and criticize the scope of Israel's offensive. The accusation is based on the notion that the destructiveness, both in terms of human life and human infrastructure of a particular operation, must be in line with the benefits or the potential benefits that could be achieved. Of course, these judgments tend to be subjective, but context certainly helps. According to the Center for Civilians in Conflict, normal urban war operations result in a casualty rate of non-combatants to combatants of 9 to 1. That's the average. From the accusations, you might expect Israel's numbers, Israel's proportionality, to be far, far worse. But guess what? According to the IDF, and I do trust the numbers of the IDF, this war's casualty rate is estimated to be 2 to 1, with between 5,000 to 6,000 terrorists isolated or eliminated by the IDF as at the end of November, and approximately 15,000 dead in total in Gaza. This does not diminish how tragic it is when innocent people lose their lives. But when discussing proportionality and the laws of armed conflicts and potential human rights violations, isn't it important to understand context and facts? And the fact is that Israel's conduct during this war has exceeded expectations under the law. And God willing, its targeted and prudent operations will be effective in achieving an end to Hamas's reign of terror in Gaza. Of course, the great hypocrisy of those who cry out for proportionality is evidenced by the relative silence of the world on the Syrian and Yemenite civil wars taking place just next door. Since 2011, the Syrian civil war's death toll surpasses 500,000, and the Yemenite civil war over 377,000 lives since 2014. Why do concerns over proportionality not elevate these crises to the forefront of international attention and activism? Shouldn't the sheer magnitude of suffering in Yemen and Syria prompt a more prominent place on the global stage? This is an example of real disproportionality, the double standard that the world imposes on Israel and on Jews, fueled by anti-Semitism and a society suffering from moral rot. This double standard was on full display this week in the halls of Congress, where the presidents of elite American universities could not clearly qualify calling for the genocide of Jews as bullying and harassment. They equivocated because they wanted to defend free speech on campus, and free speech is important. The problem is that since 2015, universities have been on a campaign to limit free speech in many other contexts, punishing microaggressions if even one person from a favored group takes offense. The presidents of these universities are now saying, and the whole world can hear, Jews are not a favored group, so offending them or threatening them is not so bad. This double standard is institutional anti-Semitism, and it is the real disproportionality, another real disproportionality that we ought to be outraged by today. On Hanukkah, we embrace the ways God came through for our ancestors by Yamim Hahem in those days. Our ancestors who were small in number, but mighty and great in heroism. In our day, Bazman Hazeh, we are similarly blessed to witness a living, transformative, small miracle called the State of Israel. The return of our people to the land of Israel, that is a small miracle. The restoration of our national spirit, the determination of our people to live in peace and security in our homeland, despite rocket attacks and threats and terrible terrorism, a small miracle. The incredible Israel Defense Forces, the descendants of the Hashmonaim, who are protecting our land and our people, the bipartisan support for Israel in the halls of Congress in Washington, D.C., it may all seem normal to us, disproportionately small, but a look deeper, we'll find the hand of God guiding these events, small miracles, assuring us, as they did for Joseph and the people who lived to see the wonders of Hanukkah, that we are not alone. Therefore, let us continue to be champions for justice, to speak out for moral clarity, to light up this holiday, the vast darkness in our world, with our small burning candles, representing our faith, our convictions, and our courage. Today, more than in other years, our candles cry out with the words of our friend, Holocaust survivor Nate Leipziger, who shouted this on Parliament Hill on Monday afternoon. Wir seinen da. We are still here. We are together. We're united. We're not going anywhere. Shabbat Shalom. Chag Urim Sameach.